The aroma of coffee and grilled burgers filled the small-town diner. Diana wiped down a worn table, her tired eyes glancing at the clock. What if today was different? What if something extraordinary happened? When Barron Trump walked in, she had no idea her life was about to change. As he left, a folded piece of paper caught her eye. What could it say? The note's contents would soon set social media ablaze and leave Diana in tears. But why? How would this chance encounter with one of America's most recognizable teenagers impact her struggling world? The next few minutes weren't just about to change her day. They were about to alter the course of her life. The clock on the diner wall ticked slowly, each second dragging like an hour. Diana's eyes flicked to it for the 100th time that day, willing the hands to move faster. The familiar scent of grease and coffee hung in the air, a constant reminder of her current reality. Diana moved between tables with practiced efficiency, her smile fixed in place even as her feet ached. The weight of unpaid bills pressed down on her shoulders, making each step feel heavier than the last. Outside, the constant buzz of the flickering neon sign seemed to mock her dreams. She remembered a time when that sign had felt like a beacon of opportunity, a stepping stone to something greater. Now it just served as a harsh reminder of how far she'd strayed from her younger self's ambitions. As she wiped down a table, her mind wandered to her college days. She'd been full of hope then, brimming with plans for the future. Those dreams now felt like distant echoes, fading with each passing year spent in this diner. The lunch rush brought a parade of faces, each blurring into the next. Diana took orders, delivered plates, and cleared tables with mechanical precision. Most customers barely looked up from their phones, tossing small change onto the table as they left. Their indifference to her struggles was a constant ache in her chest. Between serving customers, Diana caught glimpses of her reflection in the chrome of the coffee machines. Dark circles under her eyes betrayed nights spent tossing and turning, worrying about how to make ends meet. Her once vibrant hair hung limply, pulled back in a practical ponytail. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her. The diner's regulars cycled through, each with their own quirks and preferences that Diana had memorized over time. There was old Joe, who always wanted his coffee black as night, and Sarah, the high school teacher, who graded papers in her corner booth. Their familiar presence was both comforting and suffocating, a reminder of the life she'd settled into, so different from the one she'd imagined for herself. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the diner floor, Diana braced herself for the approaching dinner rush. She knew the next few hours would be a whirlwind of orders, complaints, and the constant clatter of dishes. It was the same every day, a relentless cycle that left her drained and disheartened. The bell above the door chimed, cutting through the diner's usual din. Diana's eyes flicked up, expecting another faceless customer. Instead, her gaze locked onto a tall, lanky figure silhouetted against the fading daylight. Her breath caught in her throat as recognition dawned. Barron Trump, the former president's son, had just walked into her unremarkable diner in this small, forgettable town. Time seemed to slow as Diana watched him scan the room. A few patrons glanced up, their eyes widening in surprise. Whispers rippled through the diner. Barron moved with an easy confidence, seemingly unaware of the stir his arrival had caused. Diana's heart pounded as she gripped the counter. Why is he here, she wondered, observing his deliberate movements. His presence felt surreal, like a mirage. She watched as he chose a booth by the window. The sunlight highlighted his strong jawline and piercing blue eyes. His clothes were clearly of high quality. A faint scent of expensive cologne wafted towards her, contrasting with the greasy diner smells. Diana's fingers trembled as she reached for a menu. How should I approach him? The weight of the moment pressed down on her, making each step feel like wading through molasses. Good evening, Diana managed, her voice steady. Can I start you off with something to drink? Barron looked up, his gaze meeting hers. For a moment, Diana felt exposed, but his eyes were kind, almost curious. Just water for now, thank you, he replied, his voice deeper than she'd expected. As Diana fetched his water, she felt the weight of his presence. The diner suddenly felt too small for someone like him. She glanced around, half expecting to see Secret Service agents, but there was no one. Barron Trump was alone, a solitary figure in a sea of everyday life. Returning with his water, Diana found herself hyper-aware of every movement. She placed the glass on the table carefully. Barron thanked her with a nod, scanning the menu. Diana realized that despite his fame, he was just another customer needing to be served. She straightened her shoulders, falling back on years of experience. "Our special today is the meatloaf with mashed potatoes," she offered. Barron glanced up, a hint of a smile playing at his mouth. "That sounds perfect, actually. I'll have that." As Diana jotted down his order, she wondered what brought him to this small-town diner. Was he passing through, or seeking a taste of normalcy? She moved away, her mind whirling. The other diners continued their meals, stealing glances at the notable presence. Diana felt like she was carrying a precious secret, one that set this ordinary evening apart from countless others. Diana's heart raced as she approached Barron's table, her practiced smile feeling more like a mask than ever before. She'd served countless customers over the years, but never one whose order could make headlines. "Good evening," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "Can I get you started with something to drink?" Barron looked up, his polite smile catching Diana off guard. "Just water, please," he replied, his voice soft but clear. As Diana poured the water, her hands trembled slightly. The glass slipped, almost toppling over. She caught it just in time, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry," she stammered. "No worries," Barron said, his voice kind. "It happens to everyone." The other diners had begun to take notice. Whispers and sidelong glances filled the air, creating an electric atmosphere in the usually mundane diner. "Are you ready to order, or do you need a few more minutes?" Diana asked, proud of how level her voice sounded despite the butterflies in her stomach. Barron glanced at the menu, then back at Diana. "What would you recommend?" The question caught her off guard. "Well," she began, her mind racing, "our meatloaf is pretty popular. It comes with mashed potatoes and green beans. But if you're in the mood for something lighter, the grilled chicken salad is fresh and delicious." Barron nodded thoughtfully. "The meatloaf sounds great, actually. I'll have that, please." As Diana jotted down the order, she marveled at the surreal nature of the situation. She made her way back to the kitchen, feeling a mix of relief and anticipation. When the meatloaf was ready, Diana carefully arranged the plate. She took a deep breath and made her way back to the table, navigating through the diner with practiced ease despite her nerves. "Here you are," she said, placing the steaming plate in front of Barron. "Can I get you anything else?" He shook his head, offering a grateful smile. "This looks great. Thank you." As Diana walked away, she felt a strange mix of emotions. The anticipation and nervousness were still there, but they were now tinged with a sense of accomplishment. She had faced one of the most challenging situations in her career and handled it with grace. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. She continued to serve other customers, but her mind kept drifting back to table 7. When it came time to deliver the check, Diana steeled herself for one last interaction. Diana's steps faltered as she neared table 7, the weight of the check in her hand suddenly feeling like lead. The diner's usual cacophony faded into the background. Her heart thrummed against her rib cage, a reminder of the surreal encounter about to conclude. As she approached Barron's table, Diana's practiced smile wavered. The son of a former president sat mere feet away, his presence a stark contrast to the worn vinyl booths and chipped formica tables. Diana's trembling fingers placed the check on the table. As she turned to leave, something caught her eye that made her breath catch in her throat. There, scrawled on the back of the check, was a note. Time seemed to slow as Diana focused on the unexpected message. Her curiosity overwhelmed her sense of propriety, and she found herself reaching for the check with shaking hands. As her eyes scanned the note, her vision blurred. Tears welled up, threatening to spill over. The words swam before her, each one hitting her like a physical force. A whirlwind of emotions crashed over her. Disbelief, gratitude, hope, threatening to shatter her carefully maintained composure. Her mind flashed back to just last week. She'd sat at her tiny kitchen table, bills spread out before her, the weight of her financial struggles crushing her spirit. The nursing school brochures she'd once dreamed over lay discarded in a drawer, hope fading with each passing day. Now, as she stood frozen by Barron's table, those dreams flickered back to life. Her fingers tightened on the check, knuckles white with intensity. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps, and she felt a bead of sweat trickle down her temple. With trembling hands, Diana tucked the check into her apron pocket, its weight now a promise rather than a burden. She blinked rapidly, trying to compose herself. Her shoulders straightened, a new sense of purpose coursing through her veins. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of renewed energy and genuine smiles. As she began her closing duties, Diana couldn't help but replay the day's events. She thought about how a single act of kindness could reignite hope where it had all but flickered out. Finally alone, Diana reached into her pocket with trembling fingers. She unfolded the check, her eyes drinking in the words that had transformed her day. The note's contents, now fully revealed, left her breathless with gratitude and possibility. The note trembled in Diana's hand as she stared at the words, her vision blurring. The bustling diner faded away, and suddenly she felt as if she were standing on the edge of a precipice. The dam of emotions she'd built over years of hardship began to crack, and tears spilled down her cheeks. Diana tried to blink them away, but they kept coming. She glanced around, acutely aware of the other patrons taking notice. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment as she struggled to regain control. The chef poked his head out of the kitchen. "Diana, you okay, hun?" he called out. She opened her mouth to respond, but a sob escaped instead. Her emotions poured out like a river breaking through a long-standing barrier, washing away years of pent-up frustration and disappointment. Sarah, the high school teacher from the corner booth, approached Diana. "What's wrong?" she asked gently, placing a hand on Diana's arm. Diana shook her head, unable to speak. She held out the note with trembling fingers, and Sarah read it quickly, her eyes widening. By now, other staff members had gathered around. Old Joe, the regular who always wanted his coffee black as night, leaned forward in his seat, worry creasing his weathered face. I'm sorry," Diana managed to choke out between sobs. "I don't know why I'm crying like this." But deep down, she did know. It was about being seen, truly seen, for the first time in what felt like forever. It was about someone recognizing her humanity, her dreams, her worth beyond just being a waitress in a small-town diner. As Diana struggled to compose herself, memories flashed through her mind. Late nights poring over nursing textbooks, only to have to sell them to pay rent. The proud smile on her mother's face when she'd announced her plans to go to college, and the crushing disappointment when she'd had to drop out. Diana found herself laughing through her tears, the release of emotion both overwhelming and cathartic. Her co-workers exchanged bewildered glances, unsure of how to react to this sudden outburst. "I'm okay," she said, wiping her eyes. "It's been a long time since anyone's been this kind." As she spoke the words aloud, Diana realized just how true they were. When had she last allowed herself to hope? When had she last felt like more than just a cog in the machine of everyday life? The other diners watched with a mix of concern and curiosity. An elderly couple whispered to each other, their eyes darting between Diana and the note she still clutched. A group of teenagers at a nearby booth had stopped their chatter, their phones forgotten as they witnessed the unfolding drama. Diana took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She smoothed down her apron with shaking hands and managed a watery smile. "I'm sorry for the scene," she said to no one in particular. But as she looked around at the faces of her co-workers and the regulars she'd served for years, she saw something she hadn't expected. Understanding. There was no judgment in their eyes, only compassion. In that moment, Diana felt a shift. The weight of her daily struggles, the monotony of her routine, the feeling of being stuck, it all seemed to lift, if only for a moment. She realized that this simple act of kindness had done more than just make her day. It had reignited a spark she thought had long been extinguished. Diana's world tilted as she stood rooted to the spot, Barron Trump's note pressing against her palm like a talisman. The diner's familiar sounds faded as her mind raced. Memories flashed, unpaid bills scattered across the kitchen table, her mother's disappointed face when she dropped out of college, nursing textbooks gathering dust on a forgotten shelf. These snapshots of hardship, once sources of shame, now felt different. They were testaments to her resilience. She had weathered storms that would have broken others, and here she stood, still fighting. The kindness of a stranger, especially one from such a different world, had cracked open a door she thought long sealed. It wasn't just the money, though, that would ease immediate burdens. It was the recognition of her humanity that struck Diana to her core. As she moved through her job, refilling coffee cups and clearing plates, Diana reevaluated her place in the world. She had spent so long feeling invisible, but now she felt seen, really seen, for the first time in years. The cynicism that had become her armor began to crumble. In its place, a fragile hope bloomed. If this kindness could come from such an unexpected source, what other possibilities might be waiting? Diana's co-workers noticed the change almost immediately. The slump in her shoulders lessened, and a spark returned to her eyes. Even old Joe raised an eyebrow at her brighter demeanor. "You win the lottery or something, Diana?" he asked gruffly. She laughed, surprising herself. "Something like that, Joe." As her shift wore on, Diana moved with renewed purpose. Her circumstances hadn't magically changed, but they no longer felt impossible. She thought about the note in her pocket. "Make your dreams a reality," Barron had written. It echoed like a challenge, daring her to believe in herself again. Diana allowed herself to imagine dusting off those nursing textbooks. She could use part of the money to ease her immediate financial pressures, giving her breathing room to focus on her dreams again. As the dinner rush began, Diana found herself moving with a newfound energy. She approached each table with a warm smile, her interactions filled with a genuine care that had been absent for too long. In these small moments of connection, Diana felt a familiar spark, the desire to help, to make a difference. It was the same feeling that had first drawn her to nursing. She realized her dream wasn't just about a career change. It was about reclaiming that sense of purpose. As the shift wound down, Diana stood at a crossroads. Part of her wanted to keep this moment private, but another part, growing stronger by the minute, knew this story wasn't just about her. She thought about all the other Dianas out there, people struggling, feeling invisible, people who needed a reminder that kindness existed, that their dreams mattered, that they mattered. Diana's heart raced as she stared at her phone, the story of her encounter with Barron Trump burning to be shared. This wasn't about her, it was about something bigger. Her fingers trembled as she typed out the details of what had happened. She described the diner, the unexpected visitor, and the life-changing note. Taking a deep breath, Diana hit post and watched as her story disappeared into the vast ocean of social media. At first, it was just a trickle, a few likes from friends, a surprise comment from a coworker, but soon the trickle became a torrent. Her phone buzzed incessantly, each vibration a reminder of the growing impact of her story. Comments poured in from strangers across the country, sharing their own experiences of unexpected kindness. As the hours passed, Diana watched in awe as her post was shared thousands of times. People from all walks of life were engaging with her story, debating its implications, and reflecting on their own preconceptions. The name Barron Trump trended on social media platforms, sparking discussions about privilege, kindness, and the power of small gestures. Local news outlets were the first to reach out. Diana found herself stumbling through phone interviews, her voice shaky as she recounted the details. By the next morning, national media had picked up the story. Diana's phone rang constantly with requests for interviews and appearances. The diner where she worked became a hub of activity. Curious onlookers and reporters crowded the small space, hoping to catch a glimpse of Diana. She felt overwhelmed, unprepared for the sudden attention thrust upon her. During her shift, she struggled to balance serving customers and answering questions from eager journalists. As the days passed, Diana found herself at the heart of a national conversation. What surprised her most was how the story had changed public perception of Barron Trump. Many who had previously seen him only as the son of a controversial political figure now viewed him in a new light. Diana received messages from people inspired by her story. Some shared how they'd started kindness programs in their communities, while others credited the story for motivating them to reach out to those in need. As the media frenzy began to subside, Diana realized that the impact of that single encounter reached far beyond her personal experience. She had become a catalyst for change, inspiring others to reconsider their judgments and perform their own acts of kindness. Diana's story spread rapidly on social media, inspiring countless acts of kindness. The diner buzzed with curious onlookers and reporters seeking interviews. Diana found herself thrust into an unexpected spotlight. Her life changed by a simple note. The public's perception of Barron Trump shifted as many saw him in a new light. Diana reflected on her experience. I learned that kindness can come from unexpected places. It's not about who gives, but the impact it has. Her story sparked conversations about privilege, compassion, and the power of small gestures. Inspired by Diana's tale, communities rallied to support local businesses and individuals in need. What act of kindness will you perform today?